Discord is going great. I don't really use social media, so sometimes it's weird for me. Yeah, what about you use DoorDash? That's like the best social media. You want a you want a burrito? You like Chipotle? You're sitting on your phone, you hit a button, there's a burrito at the door. They leave it at the door. You don't even have to talk to anyone. I mean, it's tremendous. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com, and today is part 2 of our troubleshooting series for the Intune tenant-to-tenant device migration solution. I promise we're going to come up with a name for that because that's still a mouthful. We're going to break these, I think, into smaller sections and do a few, just focus on hashing out an individual problem instead of like 5 problems in one series. So we'll see how that goes. I think shorter is better. Who knows? Let's fix some stuff. They leave the food and then they get the heck out of there. Okay, so I want to troubleshoot the group tag assignment. So when we migrate, we actually apply the group tag to the Azure object. It's kind of an interesting thing. So let's go ahead and take a look at a device I've migrated for this. And if we look at group membership, we can see it's in our M365 dynamic devices group, and that's because we've applied the M365 group tag to the device. Now, the great part about this is it doesn't necessarily have to happen when we register in an autopilot. This can happen beforehand. So this might have already occurred, right? No, actually it has not occurred. So this is really interesting. So if you take a look, this device, 5608 is what it starts with, did not make it to autopilot yet, right? But we still attached the group tag through the graph, and that's why it's in the correct place, right? It's in our M365 group, which is specifically looking for devices with that tag, right? So if we take a look, yeah, order ID, that's group tag M365. Okay, if we go back to devices, we'll see that it's part of that group. I searched in the wrong place. Okay, so we're in there. But sometimes folks have been telling me that that doesn't happen. So let's take a look at the logs from this device. So I'm going to go ahead and open the logs. Now, I do recommend, regardless of whether you use System Center or not, SCCM, use cmtrace.exe. That is a great tool for log reading. I don't care, what you use or if you use it or not. Configuration Manager Trace Log Tool, it's still the best. I literally just said to open it with this. Windows likes to argue back. I can't wait till the AI becomes aware. So let's go ahead and look through this. So we're going to start with the migration log, and we're going to name this pre-migration pretty soon because we have pre and post migration. So what we want to do is we want to actually understand where that happens. So I'm going to open up the script, the start migrate PS1, and let's give ourselves a little more room. So this actually happens very early on when we grab the group tag. This happens in step 3. So you can see we grab the autopilot object and we parse out its ID and then group tag. So we can actually write that pretty early on in the log. So if I scroll up to the top here, let's see here, serial number, autopilot, current autopilot group tag is. Now what'll happen is if you do not have a group tag in tenant A, this is just going to be empty. Right? And a lot of folks who aren't using group tags have that problem. So one thing we're going to do in the future is we're going to put some logic in to see if those values are null. If that value is null, there's not going to be a need to run moving the group tags, right? Or maybe we can apply it a different way when we bring it over. So that's one area where we essentially have the problem. Now, another reason this might be null is because let's take a look at, or it might be empty, is let's take a look at how we're retrieving that, right? You might throw an error there that it couldn't retrieve it. So it's retrieving it based on access to tenant A, right? So when it basically takes the serial number of the device and looks that up against the autopilot object in tenant A. And if it can't find it, if it's just not up there, it won't get it. But if you don't have permission, so remember, all this authentication is based on the app registration, the client secret and ID for tenant A. If that is not permissioned correctly, you're going to receive an error for unauthorized access. And even if the device is up there, you still won't be able to pull that value, right? So it's really important to make sure that your app registration has the appropriate permissions, right? And it does need all these to make sure we're getting everything. So always double check that. To double check that, I'm going to actually head back over to, I'm going to head over to tenant A here. Let's go ahead and go to our intra portal. Got to start saying intra instead of Azure AD. That's going to be a tough one. Okay. When we go to applications and app registrations. All right. So we have our migration application. Go ahead and just double check API permissions. First, make sure you have the right application ID. Okay. Now, for the certificate secret, you can't retrieve that again, but you can see the starting letters of the value. So if that's different for some reason, that means you don't have the right value. And if you can't retrieve it, just create a new one here. It's not a big deal. It's better to make sure you can authenticate. But head over to API permissions, and you're just going to want to make sure you have all these application type permissions, right? And you want to make sure they've been granted. If they're not granted, that's going to cause a problem, not just with the group tag, but with everything. So if everything looks good there and you retrieve the group tag, right? If in the original log you have current autopilot tag is something and you have that, then that's not where the problem occurs. So what we're going to do is we're going to now take a look in the, how many windows do I have to close here? We're going to take a look in the post-migration log. So in the post-migration log, we have a few things that happen. I'm all the way in the wrong place. Okay, so after middle boot, we begin logging for said primary user. Give me a second here. I only wrote these logs. Okay, so begin logging for group tag. We authenticate, retrieve info from the local XML, because after we capture the group tag, we store it. And I'll show you where that's stored. That's stored in the, so on the device, it's stored in our Intune migration folder. So that's this guy right here. I'll just open this with a notepad. So it's going to go ahead and try to retrieve it locally from that XML file. Okay. So that's what you're looking at here. If it can't, if it's not grabbing it from there, or it couldn't get it, right? That typically means it didn't get it from the first part. It just was unauthorized, or it was null. But take a look at this. So after it receives the group tag, right, it's giving us a serial number, and it's giving us some Azure information, and it's basically going ahead and it's going to patch there. And we will improve the logging here because it's not giving me much after. But let's take a look at what's that's doing ultimately. So I'm authenticating again for tenant B, client ID, client secret, the same steps we just went through. You're going to want to make sure it's permission. You want to make sure you have the right values. If you're not authenticating, you're not getting anywhere. So we pull in the group tag from the XML file. We get the serial number. I said the serial number could either come from a WMI call or from the XML. It doesn't matter. But what we're doing here is we have to find the Azure object to basically post the group tag to. And this is, again, if you can't query that, if you can't reach the graph in tenant B, it's gonna come back bad, right? Because then what's happening is once we do a little querying and we find the Azure ID, we're then able to take our group tag, put it inside of the JSON payload, and we make a patch call. And if the graph object, if it's not letting us hit that graph object due to permissions, then we have a problem there. So we really just have to make sure we get the value from tenant A, we're authenticated properly. Once we retrieve the value in tenant B, we still have to be authenticated properly in tenant B to then post it. And of course, it'll get disabled from there. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light on the group tag issue and how that works. Now, later on in the solution, we do register the device with Autopilot. We still apply the group tag, doesn't really matter much. But I would say it's more important to have it here early. The earlier you have it, the faster that device is going to become part of the dynamic group in tenant B, and it's going to receive its policies. 1, 2.